Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden, and it is just a wonderful time of year. We got Thanksgiving right around the corner. The holiday season is really picking up. I personally am experiencing tons of cheer and whimsy and merriment. But you know who unfortunately is probably not experiencing all those joyful emotions, Logan? The Minnesota Timberwolves, who are sitting at 8-9. They've had some rough losses over the last couple of weeks. How concerned are you about the Timberwolves, Logan, and what is wrong with them?
I'm a little concerned, but honestly, Carson, I think I'm more optimistic about the Timberwolves than a lot of Timberwolves fans long term. And if you asked me what team I thought was most likely to do a 180 from right now to the end of the season, or from right now to the end of next season, I would say it's probably Minnesota. I think they're the team in the NBA that I feel the most different about relative to their record. I think they're, I guess, my sleeper. And we did our top 10 contenders episode a couple of weeks back. I had Philadelphia in my top 10. I also had Los Angeles. I think I would slot Minnesota in there over Philadelphia still, even with their struggles. And you mentioned some of the heartbreakers. They were down 19 versus Boston. They clawed all the way back in to barely lose that game. They were down 18 versus Houston last night. They clawed all the way back in the fourth quarter to just lose right at the end. And that has been a big problem for Minnesota, digging themselves these really big holes. They're still a little disjointed offensively. They're committing bad and undisciplined turnovers. The half-court offense has been stalling out. And their defense isn't as dominant, right? That was what the foundation of this basketball team was built upon last year. They were number 1 in defensive rating. Now they're 12th in defensive rating. They were the number 5 transition defense last year. Now they're number 14. They're just league average. But I kind of see the vision, and I ultimately lean on the side of I think this team is going to figure it out. One, because they have Anthony Edwards, but also because I think they just have too many good basketball players in the rotation for them to not eventually figure it out. And I want to be clear about something. When I say this, I think the Timberwolves have actively gotten worse from last year, obviously. Right. If you could go back and not do the cat trade, I wouldn't do it because I think it was a fundamental misstep in this franchise, right? You got closer to the NBA Finals than you ever have been before, and then you sell your soul, basically. You just give up on that future and that potential. And I get it because of the salary cap implications and stuff like that, but I just can't believe that Minnesota is actually this bad. Like, they just have so many good basketball players that I believe in. And I just think they're figuring it out, Carson. I think we're just in that weird transition phase where this team is gelling together and trying to figure out the kinks. And don't get me wrong, I think there's genuine holes in this rotation. I would love if they had another defensive-minded big man off the bench or another big defensive wing. I think Naz Reid playing a ton of 5 minutes. He's not a big defender, right? With Gobert and Cat, you could have quality center play. It may not be elite defense, but Gobert and Cat could float you for the entire game. I think that you're feeling the effects of Mike Conley struggling and not being out on the court. He struggled this entire year. Dante DiVincenzo has struggled this entire year shooting the basketball, right? I'm not saying there haven't been issues, but they don't feel that far away to me. I still believe this team is really talented top to bottom, and I just think they're figuring out the kinks of a lot of new basketball players in the city. So a lot of my faith in this team has to do with my belief in Anthony Edwards as one of the building blocks of the NBA right now, one of the core guys that you would want more than anybody else in basketball, with Gobert still being able to bring your defense up to a certain baseline. And Julius Randle's played better than I thought. Honestly, Julius Randle hasn't been great, but he's been better than I expected. So I just think there's too many talented guys that I believe in. And I don't know, man. I really rock with Rob Dillingham, too. He doesn't really have a big – I just wanted to give him a shout-out here at the end. Yeah. I like Rob Dillingham minutes, man. He gave them some juice last night against Houston, and I really like his long-term prospects with this team. But it's strange, Carson. Every Timberwolves fan I talk to, our friend Donnie, some friends of the show in our Discord and stuff, they're all dejected. They are all miserable right now. They are down in the depths. They are really pessimistic about this basketball team. They are in turmoil. So I tend to be more optimistic about this team. Where do you come down? Are you optimistic about their long-term prospects, and where do you think they've come up short in the beginning of this season?
I'm more worried about the Timberwolves than you are. And I've been saying, even before they went into this skid where they've dropped 6 of 8 and they lost back-to-back games to the Blazers and they lost to the Raptors, which are some really bad losses, that out of the teams who preseason in the West had high expectations, but early in the year have been hovering around 500, if that's Dallas, if that's Denver, out of that group, I've been most concerned about Minnesota. Some of this stuff I do think is going to get better. Dante DiVincenzo has been in a brutal slump, and he's an elite shooter. I absolutely think that he will play better basketball later in the year. I also think it's not that surprising when you make a major change like they did that you would have issues with fit early in the year. That was one of my concerns with the Randle trade, that you are coming off of your high point as a team, and now you're hitting the reset button to some extent, because we saw how difficult the first year with Cat and Gobert was. So it's not some shocker that they would have some growing pains and some early season struggles now that they have brought in Randle and changed up this roster. But I think that there is a lot wrong beyond that. To me, there is cause for long-term concern here. I think there are structural problems with this roster. There is just not enough offensive skill here. And I think that you're seeing that in numerous ways. I think that you are feeling the lack of a lead playmaker in this offense, which is where Mike Conley has been so important as that sort of steady, good decision maker who's just going to be able to run pick and roll and get the ball to the right guys in the right spots. Anthony Edwards is not meant to be a lead playmaker. Julius Randle obviously is not that. And particularly, I think you're seeing just sort of a divide between those primary ball handlers and Rudy Gobert in this offense right now. There is less faith in Gobert than ever before. He's attempting 6.2 shots per game. That is easily his lowest since 2016. He led the league in paint touches last year with almost 11 a game. He's just 11th in paint touches this year, under 9 per game. And I think you see that Randle and Ant just don't trust him. They don't trust him because of his bad hands. They don't trust him because of his lack of skill as a finisher. They don't trust him because if you send 2 to the ball, and he's catching the ball with a 4-on-3, but he's closer to the free throw line, they don't necessarily trust his ability to make decisions in those circumstances. But if you don't pass him the ball, and the defense is sending 2 to the ball, when you're running pick and roll, you're negating your advantages, right? You're basically just saying, okay, now can I dribble out of this situation, and we're just going to reset. And Gobert has many limitations offensively. The lack of skill that he does have is the reason that I don't think you've ever been able to argue that he's a real positive offensive player, although some have tried. This has always been an issue, but it's worse now than ever before. They don't want to get him the ball. And then on top of that, you add that Conley, who I mentioned has been important because of his decision-making and his passing in this offense, has just been brutal. Now he's been out the last few games, but he's 7 points per game on the year, 48% true shooting, averaging 0.6 field goals made per game inside the arc. So that's a guy who you're not even sure that you can really play, and who at his age may have just hit a wall and regressed for good. And then you add in the fact that I didn't like the Julius Randle trade because I don't think he's as reliable an offensive number 2, because he's obviously a shooting downgrade from Cat. And that's another problem that this offense has right now. The spot up shooting, the spacing is not good. Jaden McDaniels is a problem offensively right now. He's under 30% from deep. And you see in the Rockets game, they are willing to aggressively help off of him, leave him. And the Minnesota offense isn't punishing them for that. So McDaniels absolutely has to be better than this. He's never going to be a high volume 3-point shooter, but when he's not taking a lot of them and he's not making them and he's not really bringing you much else in terms of anything off the bounce, right, or playmaking, that's problematic. That's a hole in this offense. And you look at Minnesota's bottom line 3-point shooting numbers, and they're not bad, right? They're 7th in makes. They're 11th in 3-point percentage. A lot of that is just Ant's pull-up shooting, though. And I think that Ant's 3-point shooting in general this year has been doing a lot to carry this whole offense. Minnesota is actually 24th in catch and shoot makes. They're 23rd in catch and shoot percentage. They haven't been good there. Ant has just been out of his mind, putting up 12 threes a night, making 42% of them. But you see, he's not as confident attacking downhill with this spacing. His free throws per game are down almost 2 from last season. He's driving 2 fewer times per game. His assists are at their lowest since his rookie season. So offensively, I have real concerns here, and I absolutely think that they've taken a step back from last year in terms of playmaking, in terms of spacing, in terms of how much I trust their number 2. And on top of that, their defense has taken a big step back. Randle is a significant downgrade from Cat at the 4 because of what Cat did on the glass, because of what Cat did guarding the post, because of what he did as a secondary rim protector. As we've talked about, bad defensive 5, much better defensive 4 than Julius Randle is, who really is just consistently pretty disengaged and very limited on that end. Rudy hasn't been the same defender that he was last year. He's only holding opposing players 6.5% below their average field goal percentage at the rim. That is not the Depoy level defender they were used to that we saw last year. And I don't think their focus and their effort has been the same defensively. And that's a concern with this team. The chemistry right now is bad. You have, against the Raptors, I believe it was, Gobert taking the offensive 3-second call late in the game, and then he and Ant are going at it. Like, the vibes are horrible here. And the vibes can get better. Okay, maybe that stuff does improve. But I'm telling you, the roster construction to me is too flawed. They're obviously going to play better than this. I don't think they're a sub 500 team. But do I think they are in any world a contender? No, I don't.
No, they're not right now. They're not close. And that's what I'm saying is I think these kinks are going to have to work themselves out over probably another season. I think this season is sadly just a punt. You know what I mean? I think you're punting to a different timeline, and that's always painful when you have a guy like Anthony Edwards when you were so close last year. The 3-second call, that sucked because Gobert clearly had the smaller defender on him where he had gotten the seal, and it's like, bro, just throw him the ball. Like, if Gobert misses that layup, I don't even care. He's probably going to get the offensive rebound and go right back up with that MF. Like, it is frustrating, though, Carson. You know, I was always afraid of the baseball. I played baseball for a very long time, dude. It was my sport. I played it for over a decade.
But you
and I sucked. I was horrible. I was a horrible baseball player for the first 5 or 6 years that I played. Why? I was scared of the baseball. You know what broke me out of it? I got hit square in between my eyes with a fly ball, and I cut myself. You could see the seam of the baseball imprinted on my forehead for a long time. After that, I wasn't scared of the baseball anymore, and I became a really good player. It is shocking to me that, like, Gobert, dude, he's gangly, he's uncoordinated, and he's scared of the basketball, dude. He just doesn't want it. So I understand, like...
I don't think it's on him. I think that he does want it. He's not good when it's in his hands, but again, if you are just negating an advantage, you're losing.
Well, I'm saying it's a balance. I think there's some times where Gobert is genuinely afraid of getting the ball in his hands, and then it's other times where Randle and Ant are probably so fed up with him losing the rock or missing a layup, and they're like, well, I'd rather just take a pull-up jumper and live with that and see what happens. So I can understand it on both sides is what I think it's a double-sided, I think it's both sides of the coin, but I tend to agree with you. If you're getting doubled, just make the smart play and live with it. Like,
and I don't actually think that Gobert is a bad short roll decision maker, right? Like, yes, he can be flustered. Absolutely. He can travel. Like, he has major coordination skill issues. But if he is able to just get a clean opportunity to dissect a 4-on-3, he can do it, right? He can find the shooter. But I really think it's a lack of faith from the other dudes in this offense. Because I think that Cat and Conley are the only dudes who actually trust Gobert to finish around the rim. And you also see this. It's not just off the roll, Cat and Conley. But Cat's gone now. That's what I'm saying from last year. He was a guy who you could actually trust to hit Gobert with a laydown pass, to run their big-on-big pick and roll. And now you've lost him from this offense. And at the end of the day, if you get a massive dude the ball around the rim, good things tend to happen. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's frustrating. He's going to fumble some of these situations. He's not a good offensive player, but a lob to Rudy Gobert is a good play, generally. If you find him off the roll against a much smaller defender, it's generally a good play. If you even feed him with a mismatch off of a post-up, that was really effective last year. Gobert was an 87th percentile post scorer, and it's going to be ugly as hell. And, like, yeah, there's going to be some spots where you go, dude, how did you not score there? But he's only doing it selectively when he has an obvious mismatch. And this year, Gobert is averaging a third of the post-ups. He was averaging 1.2 post-ups per game last year. He's averaging 0.4 this season. So they're just not giving him the ball. And, like, I get it, but also it's too much. It's to the detriment of this offense.
And traditional basketball theory says, too, when you get a paint touch, good things are going to happen. Defenders on the outside collapse in. He can either, kick it out to an open shooter. But that's where I kind of am with this team. I view it as not a lack of talent. I view it as a chemistry thing. And I think you bring up some valid concerns with their skill sets and how it isn't conducive to, easy offense. It's not. Gobert stalwarts that. It's a wall that walls you off from having easy offense when you have a guy out there like Gobert. But I tend to think that this team is just too talented to not eventually work out these kinks and figure this out. And again, I don't know if it's going to be this year. This could be problematic the entire year, and they may not figure it out until a year from now. But I just think they're too talented. And some crazy stats I found. Carson, the third best five-man lineup, minimum 100 possessions this year. This is based on point differential. Third best lineup is Minnesota. Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert. The sixth best five-man lineup in basketball this season is also Minnesota. Anthony Edwards, Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid.
I do think sample size is important with those.
These are small samples, but I'm saying is that they have. I don't think this is a. I think this is a chemistry issue. I don't think this is a basketball talent issue. I think Conley's regression is real. I think the offensive fit issues are real, but I just think this team is a lot better than this. And I don't know. I think Randall and Edwards have to trust Gobert more, but.
Have you ever seen a big man trusted less? Within his offense?
And this has been
it's been a thing, but it's worse now than ever before. I mean, last year, right, the Nuggets could play that high drop where, for all intents and purposes, they're sending two to the ball, and Ant just wouldn't even look at Gobert half the time. But now it's worse. I mean, by every metric, fewer paint touches, fewer field goal attempts. And I do think that it's to the detriment of this offense. They need to figure this out.
A well-connected team is always going to beat a team with more talent that is playing disjointed basketball. That is just fundamentally true. When you are playing, and that is the hump that I think Minnesota has to get over, Carson. I think this is going to sound so corny. I'm going to sound like Jackie Moon from Semi-Pro, ELE, everybody love everybody, but it's you got to go fight for your brother. You got to love him, and more importantly, you have to trust him. And he's going to fuck up. That's the Gobert experience. Gobert is going to screw up, but I agree with you. I don't think Randall and Edwards like Gobert, and I think that's a problem too. Is just like fundamentally, I think they would probably rather not have him on the team, and I think they got to trust him, and I think they got to figure this out. And I'm not confident that they're going to figure this out this year, but I think, again, man, I come back to it. I look at this team top to bottom, and I think they're too talented to be this bad.
They are too talented to be this bad. But that doesn't erase my concerns. And I really think what they need to figure out is how to replace Mike Conley. And I don't think that happens this year. But they were always going to have to figure that out.
You don't think it's Rob Dillingham?
I really like Rob. I think
really
he's an incredibly gifted scorer. He's shifty. He's a dynamic shot maker off the bounce. He's got playmaking shots.
I kind of like how he tees up the offense. I mean, this team plays faster. They get out in transition when Rob's on the floor. And for the most part, I like his decision-making. I like how he will set guys up for success.
It's not a talent thing with Rob. It's a Mike Conley has been winning basketball games in the NBA since 2007. And Conley, for his athletic limitations, defensively, is a more functional cog in the machine. He's bigger. He's got long-ass arms. He's a very smart defensive player because of all of his experience. He's a reliable, over the last couple years, 40% three-point shooter, and I still trust his decision-making more than I do a Dillingham. That's what they're going to need to figure out. And maybe it is Dillingham long-term, right? Somebody who is more of a true playmaker in this offense, but they don't have it right now, and they are really feeling that absence. And I think that they're 25th in assist-to-turnover percentage, right? All these metrics are just saying, we don't have enough playmaking. We don't have enough shooting right now outside of Ant just doing this ridiculous stuff. It's concerning. I think there's a lot of cause for concern. Jaden just needs to be way better also. Jaden has been a bad offensive player this year. So, yeah, I don't feel good about the Timberwolves at all.
And that's what sucks too, is just fundamentally like Houston last night, right? Like you're content with just leaving Gobert alone because nobody's going to get him the ball. You're content with leading McDaniels alone because he's not going to make you pay. And like I said, there's so much wrong right now that I think the pendulum is going to swing back in Minnesota's favor. And I don't know, man. I felt something last night watching that Houston game, watching Rob step on the court and they go on this run to close the gap, and I saw life for the first time out of Minnesota in what felt like weeks. And what sucks too is the end of this game. I'm not putting this on Ant. Ant is the only reason this team is relevant. He is a superstar, but like, you know, he takes a pull-up jumper at the end, and I'm like, damn, man. And I don't know, like you said, there's structural issues too, like the spacing sucks. I think it's going to balance itself out, man. I think the Timberwolves, Donnie, friend of the show, always keeps telling me, man, it just feels like 2022. It feels like 2022. And that may be the reality of the situation, is that it's just not this year. But
yeah. That's hard, though. That's hard when you have major pieces who are going to need to be replaced. And you were just in the Western Conference Finals last year.
And hear me out. My crystal ball says Rob Dillingham is the guy. That he is going to be able to step into a bigger role next season. You've got Terrence Shannon Jr. tearing it up in the G League. I think he is going to be a rotational guy next season. Because you got off a Cat, you can pay Naz Reid. You know, hopefully you're able to keep an A-Dub. You're able to keep, you know, you've got McDaniels and Ant under contract. It's not perfect. I mean, I think in an ideal scenario, you just hold on to Cat and let this thing ride. And
yeah, you still need to figure out the Gobert situation offensively. You need to see if Randall is a number 2 option you can trust and if he can play at a capable level defensively.
Do you think we could reach anything, Logan? Do you think we could reach a point this season or next that you look as Gobert is just spoiled goods with this team, and it may just be better to lean into like an offensive-oriented attack, or does he do too much defensively?
He does too much defensively. I mean, I think that this team would be in a brutal spot defensively without him this year, even though he hasn't been as good as we're used to. My concern with Gobert is, he does limit you offensively, but I think he is so essential to this team defensively that they can't move off of him. But he does limit their offensive ceiling, and he is just getting older. And, like, if you are going to give up on your number 2 to say, okay, we want to be more flexible long-term, which is what they did with Cat, basically, in my eyes, because I don't think that they thought Julius Randle was a better basketball player than Cat. Well, that's difficult to do when Mike Conley's 37 and Rudy Gobert is 32 at this point. That's what's hard for me with Minnesota. I just think that they've clearly taken a step back at a time when it was not ideal to do so.
I completely agree, but I'm holding on to my Minnesota stock, man. I'm hoping, I'm praying, and I'm optimistic that this is the absolute bottom for Minnesota.
Look, the window's going to be open with Ant for a long time, so long as things don't get so bad that he asks out, right? So that is the saving grace of all this. It's just tough when you were that close and you had a really good formula in place and you shook things up in a way that we didn't like at the time and that hasn't looked good at all so far. But let's give some credit to the team that beat them, Logan, last night most recently, because the Houston Rockets have been one of the most impressive teams in the league this year, and they've been hot as of late. They've won 8 of 10. They're 13-6, third in the West. Is this a team that can win a playoff series?
Not right now. I wouldn't pick Houston to win a playoff series, and they really have been impressive, man. They're 13-6. They're 8-2 over their last 10. They're number 1 in defensive rating, 98.7. That's over their last 10. That's ridiculous. They're number 2 in net rating, plus 12. Still in this stretch, they are tied 20th in offensive rating at 110.7. And I really trust this defense. They have so many disruptive defenders: Amen Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason. There's just nobody to attack. And Sengun, as we brought up last show, has really improved as a rim protector. He's 11th in defensive field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That's minimum 10 games played, 5 defensive field goal attempts per game. But he's holding players 8.7% worse than their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That's a 4% improvement from last season, which is a big step up. And I was always optimistic about Sengun as a rim protector relative to guys in his archetype, right? I think the first guy that you point to is a Domantas Sabonis in Sacramento. And Sabonis is not a rim protector at all, right? But Sengun at least had some verticality to him where you could go, okay, maybe he could be a rim protector. And I think you've seen him improve there. And that is the identity of this basketball team. And I got to tip my cap to Ime Udoka and all these young guys for buying in and making that the foundation of their basketball team. They are number one in field goal attempts per game. They are great at creating extra possessions and grinding you out. They're number one in rebounds per game. They're number 3 in rebound percentage. They're number 2 in offensive rebound percentage. And they're number 7 in stocks per game. I texted you this before the show just because it fascinated me too. Small sample size, granted, like I mentioned with Minnesota, they have the best 5-man lineup in basketball right now with Van Vliet, Amen Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Sengun. And I think you tweeted out about Brooks and Thompson when they shared the floor together too.
Yeah, they have an insanely low defensive rating together. And if you put Tari into that trio, makes the sample size even smaller, but the defensive rating is even nastier. It was somewhere in the 80s when I checked several days ago.
Yeah, there's no personnel to attack. That 5-man lineup has a plus 36.4 point differential per 100 possessions. Ridiculous. The thing we circle back to, I just don't trust their offense enough, man.
Yeah.
I just really don't. And they would really need to have someone reliable step up as their offensive leader. They're number 16 in offensive rating. They are number 24 in half-court offensive rating. And I was really hoping it was going to be Jalen Green this season. Jalen Green has the 4th lowest true shooting percentage of any 15-point per game scorer. Fred VanVleet has the 6th lowest true shooting percentage of any 15-point per game scorer. So it's like, I can already see what's going to happen when the Rockets get to the playoffs. They're going to muck it up. It is going to be a rock fight, a defensive, grimy, nasty series. But I just don't know if they're going to produce enough offensively to pull it out. They don't have a perimeter creator that I believe in. And you know, you said this a couple of weeks ago, Carson, and I was optimistic that, I don't know, Jalen Green would have a better stretch or something like that, or I'd get a glimpse of hope. At this point, dude, I just don't want him on my basketball team. I think I'd rather trade Jalen Green for a winner, a guy who is going to play smart, winning basketball. I think he might be spoiled goods, and it's not the talent. We always talk, it's not the talent at all, dude. He gives you the flashes every single game, but it's about knowing how to weaponize your talent and to create advantages and to generate high-quality shots. And Jalen Green doesn't do that. He uses all his talent and ability to shoot low-quality and generate low-quality shots. And people might point, oh, well, you know, they've got Sengun, too. It's not just Van Vliet and Jalen Green. I don't trust Sengun enough to be like your offensive hub or number one. And so that's where I'm at. I love the foundation. I love the identity. I love the ceiling. I love a lot of the guys up and down this roster. And it's going to win Houston a lot of regular season games because they're going to out-hustle you. They're going to outwork you. They're going to win defensive basketball games. But when we look through the prism to a basketball playoff series, I just don't trust their offense enough. And I don't know if there's anything that can happen this season outside of Jalen Green turning the corner or Sengun turning into a offensive number one that is going to make me fundamentally move off of that. I really like Houston. I don't love Houston, and what is stopping me from loving them is their limitations offensively.
I'm with you, and look, this has been a super successful season for Houston, I think, because of how young they are, and I think that they're achieving their goals. When they went out and they brought in Van Vliet and they brought in Dylan Brooks, it was, hey, we're going to add a winning mentality, and that's what Ime Udoka was all about. And we've got all the young talent, all the draft picks in the world. We don't need to keep racking up these top picks, even though they did it again last year with Reed Shepherd. We want to become a professional basketball team because a couple years ago, I mean, this felt more like an AAU team than anyone else in basketball, and they have unequivocally achieved that. What they are doing defensively, considering how young their core is wildly impressive. And there's actually been a trend this year. I tweeted about this the other day, but of the 8 youngest teams in the league, 4 of them have top 6 defenses right now. We've seen it with OKC. We've seen it with Orlando. We've seen it with Memphis, and we've really seen it with Houston. These young perimeter athletes who are high motor guys, balls to the wall, are coming in and making really pronounced impacts. And that's what Houston has. But that is in many ways like the prototypical formula for good regular season team, underwhelming playoff team. They remind me a lot of the Memphis teams from like 2021 to 2023 if they didn't have a Ja Morant, because those teams were deep. They were well coached. They were going to play their asses off defensively. They were young. They were hungry, but they were a really bad half-court offense. And that's what Houston is, right? They're a 17th percentile half-court offense. The only difference is at least Ja could go out there and with his flaws, had the ability to play a superstar at his level for a few games. There's nobody in this Houston offense who can do that. There is no number one in this offense. So I love their defense. I love their athleticism. I love Amen Thompson. I think he's going to be a star. I've been saying that since he was drafted. I love Tari Eason. I think he is one of the most winning young players in basketball. Şengün deserves his credit for really improving defensively, but you don't win a playoff series with a 17th percentile half-court offense. There's really not a single dude here who I trust to consistently create a good shot in this offense in the half court. I do really like Şengün as a playmaking hub and as a skilled post scorer, but as we talked about, he still struggles with efficiency. He's not bringing the floor spacing you would want. He can fall a little bit too much in love with some of those tougher touch shots, mid-range shots where it's not super efficient. So, like, do I believe in him as a playoff number one who can go out there and win you a series? I don't. And the shooting here is bad. They're 25th in threes made, 25th in three-point percentage. I like Van Vliet's playmaking, but when you're that limited an athlete, right, it's just tough to consistently create good shots. He's really reliant on his pull-up shooting. And Jalen Green, man, I don't even know if I had a full understanding of how brutal the numbers are. I mean, I've been watching a ton of the Rockets this year, and I have been critical of Jalen Green. But this is insane, dude. He's 30% from deep. He is 23% from mid-range, and he's taking a lot of those shots. He's 10 of 43. He is 21% in the paint outside the restricted area.
Dude, I mean, he's just driving into crowded lanes, dude.
It's so brutal. It's so brutal. The shot selection is so bad, and he's competing more defensively, but there are just dudes who are significantly better defenders still, who are going to make more winning plays, and who aren't going to take your offense out of rhythm and force bad shots in a way that a Jalen Green is. You ultimately need somebody,
dude.
Yeah, you do need somebody on this roster to step up as an offensive number one, but I don't think it's Jalen Green. I just haven't seen the growth that I would have needed offensively. I mean, this has been his worst season offensively, arguably, which is tough for the Rockets, but at the same time, you don't need him. You have so much talent around him. I think the people have been too hard on Jabari Smith. There was like this whole reckoning earlier in the year about how Jabari Smith was a bust. First of all, I think a lot of people didn't know what to expect from Jabari Smith, and I've talked about this before. He was never some dazzling wing who's beating dudes off the bounce. No, he was stiff.
He's a winner.
He's a two-way player. He's a really good shooter, and he hasn't been as good of a shooter as I would have hoped he was as a prospect, but he was also just in a really bad slump earlier this year. He's a solid two-way winning role player.
I think he's a dog defensively, man.
He is. He's a really, really good defensive player. That was his entire value as a prospect to me. I was like, this dude is a big-ass 3-and-D wing. And that's why I never thought that he was in conversations with Chet. I never thought he was as good of a prospect as Paolo. But I still think that he's a guy who I want on my team at the end of the day. So, tons to like with Houston. But, yeah, they are, again, basically the prototype for that can win high 40s, maybe 50 regular season games on the back of their defense and their effort and their athleticism. But you get them in a playoff series against a Dallas or a Denver or the Lakers or Phoenix or Golden State, all these teams that have superstars, all these teams that have much better half-court offenses, that have better shooting, that have more reliable decision makers, and there's just no chance that I'm betting on the Rockets offense.
I got a couple of questions about Reed Sheppard.
Okay.
One, do you think he could be the number one offensive? Do you see that kind of ceiling with Reed? Not as a scorer necessarily, but just as a guy who can generate good looks and score more efficiently.
Honestly, I see an older Reed as playing a pretty similar role to Van Vliet, where he's more of a floor general. He's an awesome pull-up shooter. I think he's a better shooter than Van Vliet. I think that he can be a better defender, but both guys who are undersized but are dogs defensively make the absolute most of their physical gifts there. but I don't think that Reed has the shot creation or the next level playmaking to be a number one offensively. I never have. I've always thought super high floor guy, dude who I would love to have as my third option. Think kind of a potential Derek White, not as great defensively, but that sort of winning impact. Derek White is insane. I'm not saying as good of a version, but that archetype, but not a number one.
Do you think they'd be better if they gave him more burn now?
No, not really. I mean, he's kind of struggled this year. I haven't really been super impressed by a lot of his shifts, and I don't think that they need him out there. I mean, I think they get their big athletes on the floor. I kind of love that they've really just been playing these 7 dudes all a lot of minutes because you're getting Tari out on the floor for 25 minutes a night. You're getting Amen on the floor for close to 30 minutes a night recently. It's felt like I don't think that they need to be overplaying Reed because he's not as impactful as these other guys right now.
Yeah, the only reason I ask that is just it sucks that you're so close. You feel like, on one side of the basketball, and then on the other, you're just – it feels like they're far away, and far away enough to where I wouldn't favor them in a play. Even if they were the high seed, even if they have home court.
Agreed.
Like, I would pick them to get beat by
I'd take
a lot of
over
teams.
them
A
in
lot
a
of
playoff
– as
series.
would I. I think Ant big dogs you in that series.
It's hard. It's hard if you don't have that guy, and it's hard if you don't even have that offensive skill in the aggregate. But, again, I think that – Reed has looked a little outmatched athletically at times. I think he's struggled scoring inside the arc, so I don't think that he's the answer for this year. Shout out to the Kentucky guards, him and Rob Dillingham, both. We're talking about what they can do for their teams, but I don't think that either one is the answer right now. And again, Houston's got other dudes who deserve to be playing over him. Shall we talk about another team in the great state of Texas, Logan? Another young team that is making a playoff push early in the year. The San Antonio Spurs, Logan, have won 4 straight games now. And a lot of that was on the back of NBA Player of the Week, Harrison Barnes. Can we give a quick round of applause to Western Conference Player of the Week, Harrison Barnes? A lot of it also, though, even though they did a couple of wins without Wemby, is because of Victor Wembanyama, who has been playing incredible basketball as of late. Do you think Wemby can carry the Spurs to the playoffs, Logan?
No. No.
Okay.
I mean, like...
Great segment. Thank you.
There is a way... I'm going to save that for later in the show, but I just think there's teams that just have way more talent, like, that I believe in. Like, what Wemby's doing is kind of ridiculous recently. You mentioned the 4-game winning streak. This is just Wemby's last 6 games. He's 33, 11, and 4 on 68% true shooting with 3.5 blocks per game. Dude, he's pulling 13 threes a night. Ew. And he's banging them. Mm-hmm. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, dude, I think it's going in. When Wemby starts in that triple threat and gives a jab step or just pulls up, I mean, is Wemby just going to be an elite shooter? Is he just gonna do this? I don't know, man. It's like an unblockable shot. Like, if Wemby figures it out from behind the arc, dude, I'm pulling 13 threes a game. I mean, he's making them. Like, it's ridiculous, bro. He's got Walker Kessler standing on him, and it doesn't matter, man. He's dropping bombs. I still think the Spurs just rotationally are too far away. I will give them credit, though, man. Chris Paul, I think, was such an awesome add, just having that stabilizing presence. I know that everybody talked about that in the offseason in the beginning of this year, but it's true. Just having a guy that can feed Wemby in the right spots and run some two-man game and pick and roll and create little advantages for him has made all the difference in the world. Mm-hmm. Because Wemby is the greatest prospect that we've ever seen with his ability, with his skill and talent rolled up into this kind of body and how we can change the game defensively. Having a guy that can just set the table for him makes his life so much easier. And it's been him. It's having a real NBA player in Harrison Barnes. But the rest of this roster, I think, is just too young and too far away. But I don't know, man. If this is a real... Again, it's a small sample size. Like, if you look back 10 games, he's down to, like, 38%, right? Which is still very, very good for Wemby. Don't get me wrong. But over 40% is a lot to expect for an extended jump. But I don't know, man. If Wemby keeps hitting threes like this, dude, I'm afraid for the league, bro. This is an unstoppable, unblockable shot, bro.
Yeah, I honestly think that overall his percentage, where it's at right now on the year, which is 34.5, is similar to where it'll end up. Maybe he gets up to like a 36, but he was really struggling early in the year. And now he's been super hot as of late. I think overall he's going to settle somewhere in that 35, 36% range. But I mean, he's been out of his mind. And this is the top 15 player that we hope to see. This is why early in the year, when we talked about some of the struggles that he was having offensively and really relying on the jumpers and creating from the perimeter and not getting as much of that easy offense manufactured for him, those were all issues at the time. I also made sure to say, don't underestimate how much better this dude can start playing like that. Because this was the arc last year, right? He comes out of the gate and he's struggling with efficiency. And a couple months into the season, all of a sudden, he's playing like a star. And then later in the season, he's playing like a top 20 guy, right? He just keeps getting better and better, sometimes exponentially. And on the year now, you mentioned his stats over the last 6 games. As a whole, he's giving you 24, 10, 3, 5 stocks a night on 60% true shooting. Absolutely playing better basketball than he was last year. It is awesome that he's shooting so much better. I also think when it comes to his three-point volume, the kinds of shots that he's taking matter to me. I really like pick and pop looks for him. I like looks as a transition trailer for him. I understand that he shot better on pull-ups last year than he did on shots off the catch. Overall, though, I just prefer, in most ways, Wemby not being asked to create off the bounce. And I think we've seen this year, right? When is he efficient? As a roller. That includes pops, but he gives you 1.19 points per possession. That's awesome. He's either popping, and he has this KP-like ability. That's really who it reminds me of most when I watch him shoot, to stand 28 feet out, right? He's got this deep range, and he can just shoot these lasers, and nobody can get out and contest him. They can't affect him at all. That kind of range at that height is really ridiculous. But he's either getting those pop looks or he's rolling and he's the biggest target around the rim that we've ever seen. Transition, he's always been great because of what he can do as a trailer. He's also just faster than other bigs, and in the open court, if you can find him around the rim, that's unstoppable. As a post player, 67th percentile efficiency, right? He's not the most comfortable post player yet, but he's still just so massive that he has real advantages there, and he's skilled enough to score pretty efficiently. Where's he inefficient on the flip side of that? When you ask him to create out of isolation, 28th percentile. When you ask him to create out of pick and roll, he's only been 18th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler this year. Small sample size, sure, but as I've always said, the dude is incredibly skilled for 7'4". He is not a wing, though, and he can have some trouble with the handle. He can have some trouble getting a step on dudes, getting downhill. So I still think he's taking a really, really high volume of threes. Because even when you compare him to like the other elite floor spacing bigs, right? Cat takes 5 threes a game. KP takes about 5 threes a game. The difference that I can hear out is that those guys are much more grown men, and so they are much more effective post scorers. They are more comfortable scoring inside the arc. And I get that. Wemby isn't at that stage yet, but I don't want him to become overly reliant on the 3 ball. Right now, here are the only dudes taking more threes per game than Victor Wembanyama, who's taking 9.3. LaMelo, Ant, Tatum, Luka, Brandon Miller, Tyler Hero, Steph, Malik Beasley. He is right in front of Damian Lillard, Derek White, Donovan Mitchell, Kobe White, Tyrese Halliburton, Trae Young, Peyton Pritchard. Like, it's a bit crazy to me, and he is making them right now. But as we talked about earlier, good things happen when you get paint touches, especially for a massive human being like Victor Wembanyama. So I think there's still a little bit more of a balance to be struck there. Also, more than the threes, I don't love the mid-range for him because he's been taking more mid-range jumpers this year and he's just shooting 34%. All that to say, these are the little things that I would like to see Wemby adjust, but he's having a monstrous superstar level impact on the game. And we're talking about his offense because that's where the numbers have just been eye-popping as of late. But at this point, I think he'd also have to be your defensive player of the year. I mean, the fact that he has this Spurs group as a top 10 defense is incredible. And obviously, he's leading the league in blocks by far. No surprise there. The defense is 7.5 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor. He's holding opposing players 20% below their average field goal percentage at the rim. It's just incredible. I mean, just his sheer size alone makes such a massive impact on the game. And then when the skill stuff is clicking along with that, just nothing you can do. I mean, he's just going to dominate on both ends. I don't think the Spurs are a playoff team, though. Unfortunately, I just think the West is too good. I think the West is too talented, and I do like the CP3 fit here. And I know that you didn't like Harrison Barnes, Logan. He is at least a professional basketball player. He is. He's a veteran, grown-up basketball player. And Vassell, hopefully, throughout the rest of the year, will be healthier. He's a good basketball player. They got him back for a few games. Then he's been down again since. Like, this isn't a bad roster around Wemby. I've been impressed with the level they've defended at. I've liked Castle in his rookie season. But it's just the competition you're comparing them to, right? It's the teams right around them. Minnesota is right behind them right now. Sacramento is behind them. Those are still more talented basketball teams who I expect to turn it around. It's really, really tough to be a top 10 team in the West. That's not a Wemby thing. It's just the Spurs roster, to me, improved from last year, but isn't in a position where they're going to go out there and win 48 games like you might have to make the playoffs in this West.
Yeah, I mean, if the Spurs were in the East, I'd say they're a shoo-in to make the playoffs.
A shoo-in.
Yeah, like, no doubt. I'm glad you bring up the off-the-dribble point, because I'm telling you, man, when Wemby sets, like, and he just gets his feet balanced and, like, even, I think it's going in. When he can get up and set up out of that triple threat and, you know, give a jab step or whatever and get that little initial space, like, when he gets even, I think Wemby's a really good shooter. But I agree with you, too. I think long-term, just – you got more counters to guys. They're not just going to worry about you spotting up. You're not going. More importantly, Wemby isn't going to lull himself into just becoming like, you know, because you're just going to settle for that. We've seen that with guys like Ant, sometimes with guys like De'Aaron Fox, you know, where you're hitting them and then that becomes basically your entire shot diet, and you're just kind of eliminating other really easy aspects of your offensive game. But I think it's more encouraging that he's hitting them at this clip than anything else.
I don't disagree. I mean, it's such a ridiculous weapon. I've always viewed the perimeter stuff as the garnish on his game, right? The thing that puts him over the top from being already one of the craziest talents that we've seen to the craziest talent, certainly at least in the last 20 years. One of the 3 greatest prospects in basketball history. But it's more than garnish right now. I mean, this is a foundational aspect of his game when these shots are falling like this. I just also think, you know, the guy's shooting 80% in the restricted area, right? Like, he is the single most ludicrous lob target, a rim finishing target in basketball. And I want to make sure that the situation that he's in is always maximizing that. And I want to make sure that he does grow more comfortable playing with physicality and that he does fill out his frame and that he does become an even more effective high-volume post player, because all of that is in there. And it's already incredible, obviously, the level that he's playing at and how much he has started to play better even within this season. The dude is a freak, one-of-a-kind talent. I just want to make sure that he becomes the absolute best version of himself. Getting some holiday shopping done this weekend? Pick up some touchdowns. They're on sale at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. What else would you expect from the #1 place to bet touchdowns?
DraftKings has doorbuster profit boots and bet one, get one promotions on all types of touchdown bets. Be sure to check the DraftKings Sportsbook app all weekend for flash deals that will have you dancing in the end zone.
Grab some TDs with DraftKings Sportsbook. They're on sale from Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS to opt in. That's code NERDS only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, Logan, because this is a team that has been at the center of a whole lot of panic early in this year. Got off to a brutal start. Now they've won 5 straight. They're sitting at 9-9. In the East, that's good for the 5 seed. How much are you moved by this win streak that they're on?
Not much, but I'm a little bit more encouraged. I'm cautiously optimistic about the Bucks, and they have won 5 straight. They've got wins over Houston, over Chicago, over Indiana, over Charlotte, and over Miami. 4 of those games were at home in Milwaukee until this most recent one in Miami, and that's where I got to start. I got to give them credit. Great job closing out Miami. Dame gives you a 37-piece. This is without Giannis and Chris Middleton, who's still not on the floor. AJ Green came up clutch in that game. He hit some big threes. So I got to tip my cap to them for finishing off Miami without Giannis. That was a good win. And over their last 5 games, they're 6th in offensive rating, they're 6th in net rating, and they're 11th in defensive rating. The biggest thing to me, the two biggest things at least, have been on the offensive end. And that's, one, just them shooting the basketball. They're shooting 44% over their last 5 games from behind the arc. That should be the basis of this team. It should be Giannis and Dame, 2-man game, and them feeding shooters around them. That should be where this offense generates their looks. And I think they've been spamming more Giannis and Dame combinations. I think that has been to the benefit of this offense. I also think Giannis and Dame have just been playing better. But guys have been shooting really well. Gary Trent over the stretch, 57% on 8 threes, or more than 8 threes a game. A.J. Green, 6 threes a night. He's making 45% of them. Brook Lopez is shooting 54% on 5 threes a game. So that's where I'm excited about it. I think the Bucks are figuring out a little bit more offensively that Dame and Giannis, 2-man game, feed them, let them go to work, set up shooters outside, and the shooters are knocking down shots. That's where I'm most encouraged. I'm just not really moved by this depth or this defense yet, and that is where I still worry about Milwaukee. This is still an old team. They're still not great defensively. I still think that there's perimeter defenders I like. I like A.J. Green as a perimeter defender. I like Andre Jackson Jr. as a perimeter defender, but I still think they lack in those areas. And then I just, those holes are too glaring to me to overlook. And then the depth I still don't love. I don't think this is a particularly deep team. And the guy that I've kind of soured on the most is like Bobby Portis, man. I used to really love Bobby Portis. Do you think he just sucks now? Like,
he's not great.
Dude, because my old thought about Bobby Portis was, yeah, man, he can, play some backup 4 and some backup 5 for you. He's got a nice little post game. And maybe it was just last night that left a sour taste in my mouth. But, no. I don't know, dude. He's shooting these dumbass early shot clock, over-the-shoulder, turnaround, mid-range jumpers that are inefficient, bad looks where he's not moving the basketball. He's not really a good defender. I don't know, man. Bobby Portis used to be one of my favorite bench guys in the league, and I just kind of wonder if he just sucks now.
I mean, he's been doing that all year, bro. I mean, he's been super inefficient. He loves going his little turnarounds, getting to a little bag work out of the post, and he's also been shooting poorly from 3.
Like, don't get me wrong,
he's not a dude
man.
I want to be playing 24 minutes a night.
It's a sexy shot when it goes in, but when you're not hitting it, it's
I'm a fiend for the
disgusting.
post. I've always been a fiend for the post. But it's interesting, Bobby early in his career seemed like he was just destined to be one of those dudes who puts up 14 a night in situations where it doesn't matter at all, like he was doing in Chicago and he was doing in Washington. And then he found a way to be a valuable contributor to a championship team, but he's been bad this year, for sure.
There was just a stretch, dude, in the second quarter where I think Bobby missed like 6 or 7 shots in a row, and I'm like, pass the ball, Bobby,
He puts
please.
a lot of shots up. He puts a lot of shots up, for sure.
Volume shooter. But those are my problems at the end of the day, man. I still don't love the depth. I don't love the defense. And that's what I've been saying about Milwaukee, though, man, is I think you just got to lean in full bore into the offense and try to outgun some teams and outshoot them. And they've been doing that recently, but I want to see some improvement from the defense, and I want to see them get some wins against real playoff contenders. Yeah. I don't think any of these wins in this stretch have been over real contenders to me.
This is a funny Bobby Portis stat. He attempts more shots per minute than Dame. He's only behind Giannis in terms of field goal attempts per 36 on the team. I think encouraged is the word that I would use, maybe more than truly moved by this Milwaukee win streak. A turnaround was always inevitable, right? You could look at this stretch of the schedule and say, okay, it's going to soften up. They're going to rack up some wins. And there was never a moment where I doubted that Milwaukee would be in the playoffs, right? I think that you just can't. With Philly, as deep a hole as they've dug, and with them, health is more of a concern. I still can't see them missing the playoffs. The East is just too bad. So that hasn't been the concern that, they were a 4-9 team for good. But I also have been legitimately encouraged by some of the stuff we've seen beyond just them winning games. They've looked more capable defensively. They're 15th in defensive rating on the year now. And I think that they've started to play the right role players more. Guys who do bring a little bit more of that two-way value. We're seeing more AJ Green, who's just a good basketball player. I mean, he is a lights-out shooter, 48% from three. He competes defensively, and they're 8 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor. They've been starting Andre Jackson, which is something we've discussed for the last 2 years because he's been the best perimeter defender on their roster. My concern was always just he's too limited offensively. Can you make that work? He's made a big difference defensively. He really has. He's a guy you can throw at primary ball handlers, and he can give them much more trouble than anybody else, and he's active as a team defender. Players are shooting 38% when guarded by Andre Jackson, and their defense is 10 points per 100 possessions better. So they are making these marginal improvements, mitigating some of their limitations with the right role players. Is this something that, in terms of my real big picture thoughts with Milwaukee, really moves me, though? Not really. It makes me feel a little bit better about them, but I still worry about an Andre Jackson in a playoff series as a starter because I think that teams are just going to ignore him offensively. That's a problem. And with him out there, your defense, it's definitely been better, but overall, you're still an average defense, right? So they're finding guys who can play both ends more capably, and their offense is picking up. Their offense I've never been as worried about. They have issues in terms of direction, organization there, but they're too talented to not be like a top 10 offense. But the same big picture things, right? They still don't have good role players here. They still don't have athletes around Giannis on the defensive end. And the one thing that I still think we need to see figured out, Logan, is why Damian Lillard plays so much better when Giannis is not out there. I mean, he just looks so much more comfortable as an offensive number one. He really, truly does. When he can just run the show and run high pick and roll all game, he goes crazy. I mean, he looks like he's still got it 100%, and this isn't a one-off thing. We have 14 games of Dame without Giannis since last season. He gives you 31 points per game on 65% true shooting. With Giannis, he's under 24 a night on 58% true shooting. So I still don't think that they've really figured out that fit and that they've really figured out how to maximize Dame alongside Giannis. So, like I say, marginal improvement, encouraging stuff. Is this really, really moving the needle where I would take them over a Cleveland, where I would take them over a New York? No. They have the potential to win a playoff series, but that never has been something that we've written off. And Middleton will make them better when he's out there, but he doesn't solve the core issues we're talking about of being slow, of being old, of not being athletic. So I think that top three in the East is still very much locked. And really the only truly moving thing from Milwaukee would be if they were able to rejoin that group that you would have had them in preseason.
Yeah, and I think the way to do that would be to get better role players and to get guys that can fill out the bottom of this rotation.
Definitely.
Like I would love if Milwaukee could get another point guard, another guy that could, take on some responsibility as a playmate, a high level guy, a high impact guy. If they had more athletic defensive wings, basically, if the Bucks had three really good basketball three more really good basketball players, I think it would make a big difference. And I hate to point the finger on a positive Bucks segment, but again, you look at the draft pick this year, and they could have addressed a rotation spot with that pick. That's the thing I've come to kind of learn about the NBA. The reason that I think that some people struggle to watch it it's the fastest moving sport in the world. Nothing changes quicker than basketball, man. It can change on a dime. One move, one little thing changes and everything can fall apart. And one move can make the difference. And I feel like the Bucks, that's why I'm hoping that the trade deadline, they make a move to get another rotation guy, or they get, the season's not lost and they're playing better basketball. They're just not where they need to be. Again, the standard for a team like the Bucks, when we look at expectations, right? The Rockets' expectations are not to win a title this year. The Rockets' expectations are to make the playoffs and maybe win a playoff series. The Bucks' expectations and goal, since making the Damian Lillard trade, since winning a title, are to win another title because you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the best players on the planet, and they're just not there yet. So I hope they could maybe make a move. And I'd give up Bobby Portis, man. I wouldn't care. I don't think Bobby Portis wins you games anymore.
I think that's a no-brainer. The question is, who wants Bobby Portis?
That's a great point. I would look to make a couple moves before the trade. And I don't know what intriguing assets you have to give another team.
Nothing.
But
you have nothing.
At this point, you have Dame and you have Giannis. I don't know why you're worried about the future. You know what I mean? Maybe Giannis decides to leave and you could make moves that dig yourself a bigger hole that you need to get out of. I'm on the side of fuck the future. We could maybe win right now. I'm going all in on what we got. And so I would mortgage all of my assets to try and get better and to try to get closer to winning a title. I don't know.
What assets? They don't have a first until 2031.
I'm giving it up, man. I'm giving it up.
This is the dilemma they've put themselves in. They had to move faster, right? I think they had to move off Brook faster. I think arguably they had to move off Middleton just for availability, not because of his ability, but because of availability and some of the specific shortcomings of your roster in terms of athleticism and whatnot. Listen, things are looking better, right? Everybody's playing better, basically. Gary Trent Jr., awesome shooter, has started to knock down shots. He was super cold to start the year. Brook has been quite good in this win streak. And I do think that they've had less breakdowns defensively. I think that they've just looked more connected, but they just have fundamental personnel limitations that can't be solved as things are currently constructed. You know who's trying to just blow shit up, Logan? Who should have been doing this for, about 4 years now? The Chicago Bulls. Once again, we have the delight of Chicago Bulls trade rumors. It never happened with DeMar. But now we're hearing about it with Lavine and we're hearing about it with Vooch. We've been hearing about it with these guys, but we're hearing it again. And this time, apparently, Karnisovas is taking it seriously. What destinations would you actually like for those guys, Logan? Let's start with Lavine. Where would you like to see Zach Lavine end up if he were to be traded?
So I've got 3 hypothetical trades for Lavine. I've got 5 hypotheticals for Vooch. I want to hear your thoughts. You tell me who says no in each of these scenarios. And to preface this, I actually think, I wanted Chicago to get off DeMar earlier. I wanted Chicago to get off Lavine and Vooch earlier, right? Blow that core up ASAP. I wonder if they've played their hand right just because of, the only reason I say that is just because these guys I feel like have higher value than they did last year.
Because they're playing better?
Because they're playing better ball right now. Lavine has given you 22, 5, and 4 on nearly 65% true shooting. He's got the 7th highest true shooting percentage of any 20-point per game scorer. So I'm just saying optics-wise,
sure,
maybe a team would be willing to pony up a little bit more to get these guys because they're playing better ball. The first destination, the one that I think makes the most sense, and again, Lavine is a little harder to trade for because he has the $43 million deal that you have to match. The first destination that I think makes sense is the Miami Heat, and my hypothetical is Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, and 2 Miami first-round picks, the one for this year and the one for 2028. Who do you think says no?
I think Miami would prefer to avoid giving up 2 firsts for Zach Lavine on that contract with
the only reason,
how hurt he was last year. But I think if maybe you make it a first and 2 seconds, then I think we're in business.
Is that mutually beneficial? Do you think both teams should say yes?
Love the trade for Miami, actually. That has been one of my 2 main destinations that I've wanted to see Zach Lavine go for the last couple years because they've needed more dynamic offensive talent in the backcourt. Now, Hero has been awesome this year. I still think having a little more offensive punch is what they need to be a more serious playoff team. And if you can get Lavine to buy in defensively, that would make Miami definitely a more serious playoff team. And I don't think that there's a lot of value there that you're totally losing sleep over. And if you're Chicago and you get a first, that's really the main selling point for them. Maybe they would try to squeeze 2 firsts out of it. I don't know if Lavine is going to get that on this contract.
The only reason I go with the 2 firsts is, one, again, you have to make up value, so Chicago wants it.
Yeah, maybe that would be fine. If I were Miami, I'd be okay with that because I think otherwise, what are you doing, right? This is the spot that they've been in since their finals run, which we know was a bit crazy, just stagnant, content with talent that isn't going to contend, but they still have Jimmy and Bam and Hero playing better now. So honestly, yeah, I'll say your initial trade even is a win-win.
And not only does it help you win playoff games, I think it helps you win regular season games with Jimmy's inconsistencies too. So that's my first spot. The next spot, I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I have written down the San Antonio Spurs, and my hypothetical trade here is you accelerate the timeline. If you're San Antonio, you get another winning basketball player right now that complements Wemby and CP. The hypothetical, you give up Devin Vassell, you give up Trey Jones, and you give Chicago's first round pick back to them for this season. I also considered doing Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones and then a first round pick.
That's a big difference.
It is a big difference. I agree.
Personally, I don't think that Lavine is enough of a needle mover for where the Spurs are at right now to move off of Vassell. Not that I think that Vassell is a future star. I just think he's a really good number 3, right? I think that he's a nice offensive player, has defensive tools. And like the Spurs, if they do bring in a Zach Lavine, they're still not a team that we look at and think, oh, they're going to win a playoff series in the West. And you give up a first on top of that. To me, he's not enough of a win-now asset for a team that is still so far away from contending. And I would like to keep on to Vassell.
Okay, I think I agree with that too. It is a little much. The last one I've written down is with the Toronto Raptors. Again, their timeline's a little iffy, but I think they need some half-court offensive creation. And because of the contract that this guy signed, you would have to wait until after December 15th to pull the trigger.
Right.
But my hypothetical is Emmanuel Quickley and Davion Mitchell straight up for Lavine. And I thought about throwing in a first, but just considering where Toronto is, I think that would just be a hard sell because Toronto's definitely going to be in the lottery.
This one, to me, is kind of a little bit of a case of why would Toronto do that? Does Toronto really want to get, like, I don't know if I would say marginally better, but in the big picture, marginally better when they suck right now? And clearly they believe in IQ. They paid IQ. I don't like that one so much.
All right.
I think Chicago would be happy with it, probably getting IQ. I mean, although their backcourt's already kind of crowded.
It is.
Because you've got, obviously, Giddey and Kobe and Lonzo and Io. So that's not my favorite.
And I tried other teams, but again, it is really hard to make this money work with Lavine because you have to have a guy that is on that kind of contract.
Right.
And there's just not that many guys that are on that contract that are less valuable than Lavine. So do you have any potential destinations?
Let me pitch you my Lavine trade. So I mentioned with Miami, they're one of the 2 teams that for these past couple of years, and we've had these conversations before, I've been looking for as big-time Lavine targets, teams that I think he would move the needle for the most. Golden State is the other. I would love him to the Warriors. The stuff that we've talked about with a second reliable offensive star that they have needed, having that extra offensive punch where it's not just a redux of the 2023 series against the Lakers, right, where they are just able to so singularly key in on Steph and challenge everybody else in that offense to beat them. Lavine would provide that. I'm optimistic that he could be more engaged defensively, and obviously is a hell of an athlete, but just has never bought in on that end. But with what we've seen from their collective buy-in right now, I'm a little more optimistic you could get that out of him. And I think he's an awesome offensive fit, not just because he brings that punch, but also because of what he can do as a movement shooter, what he can do off ball, such a special shooter. I really like it if he's able to play capable defense for you. Here's the thing. The contracts are weird there, right? I don't know how you give up Andrew Wiggins when he's playing like this. I wouldn't. Wiggins has been phenomenal this year. He has been exactly the sort of two-way forward that they have needed, that he was for them in 2022. So here's what I would be willing to offer. I would be willing to compromise your depth to make it happen. Tell me what you think about this trade. There's a lot of pieces involved because it's a lot of mid-sized contracts. What if you give up D'Anthony Melton, Gary Payton II, Kyle Anderson, Jonathan Kuminga, being obviously the jewel of this, Gui Santos, that is just purely to make the contracts work, and a second for Lavine. And if you need to make that second a first, fine, I'd do it. That wouldn't hold me back if I'm Golden State.
I mocked up a trade to the Warriors, and the only reason I didn't do it was because the deal breaker was I didn't want to give up Gary Payton and send him out of Golden State.
Okay, but can I tell you who that would leave you with if you're Golden State? Well, this is the rotation you'd still have.
I love that. I love that deal because when I went back to it, I was like, well, you either got to give up Wiggins, and I don't want to give up Wiggins right now. I would do that trade. I think that makes a lot of sense for Golden State. You just can't give up Wiggins right now.
No, you can't. But do you think that would need a first as a pick, or do you think Kuminga's enough?
I think
an
Kuminga's
asset?
enough of bait to get a second. I mean, I still think teams, and again, Chicago's timeline isn't, they already punted to get Josh Giddey. All right, well, fine, let's punt, let's get Kuminga.
Exactly.
I think that makes sense.
And I understand that it's kind of a jumbled, convoluted trade because there's so many pieces. But if you're the Bulls, are you really going to get a much better asset than Jonathan Kuminga for Zach Lavine? Are you getting multiple firsts? And I'm not the biggest Kuminga guy. We've talked about this. I don't think he's going to be a star, but he has that ability that I think is intriguing. I mean, this is a former 7th overall pick in the draft. So that would leave you, if you're Golden State, with a rotation of Steph, Lavine, Wiggins, Dre, TJD, Buddy Hield, Pods, Moody, Lindy Waters, Looney. That to me is like an actual title contender.
You don't give up Melton either, right?
Well, Melton's done for the year.
Oh, he's out for the year?
You do give him up, but just to make the contracts work. But yeah, they use their mid-level exception on him, and he's not going to be able to play. But that's a title contender, I think, Logan, because yes, you're losing a little something.
Oh, that team's got offensive juice, man.
They've got offensive juice. You're losing a little wing defense and athleticism on the wings, sure. But I still think that you're maintaining good depth. I mean, play Moody more minutes. Play Lindy Waters more minutes. These are dudes who are in that same archetype, who are good, who play quality minutes when they're on the floor. And Pods will play better, I believe, as the year goes along. Buddy obviously has been so good for them. But you have now 4 really high-level basketball players. If Wiggins keeps playing like this, and introducing a Zach Lavine who gives you that extra offensive juice that you need, I would love that for Golden State. I would. I think that'd be a real needle mover.
Yeah, that Miami is probably my favorite 2 destinations for Lavine. I think they just make the most sense.
Agreed. People are always going to talk Lakers. Nah.
What the fuck do the Lakers need Lavine for?
Yeah, it's not my favorite. Okay, how about Vooch? You have 5 Vooch trades. Let's hear them.
Yeah, I mean, and the only reason, Vooch is a lot more movable, right? Because he's a $20 million contract. And again, he also, I feel like, has decent value right now. He has the 2nd highest true shooting percentage of any 20-point-per-game scorer. So the first one, although he has been playing good basketball, and I don't love some of these, but Brook Lopez and a Pelicans first-round pick to send him to the Bucks.
No. The last thing the Bucks need to do is get worse defensively.
Okay. I also mocked up a Warriors trade just because I didn't mock up one for Lavine.
Okay.
And I said Melton Anderson and Golden State's first-round pick this year. And my thought process there was you have another lineup combination offensively with Vooch, and then you have a big body that in some potential matchups maybe he works in just because he's bigger.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Because, I mean, Melton's done for the year, right? So that's a 0 asset for you, for the Warriors. I mean, I definitely like the idea of the Dubs getting another big. I don't know that they'd play him a crazy amount, but here's the thing with Vooch. Because he's only a $20 million contract, it's not like you're eating nearly as much value. And he is playing unbelievable offensive basketball this year. I mean, he's 58% from the field, 46% from deep, has been the offensive player that Chicago would have hoped for when they got him. Really, just when he's knocking down his threes consistently, he's a really good offensive player. I don't hate that. I don't hate that. I think that addresses a need for the Warriors. If I were to choose between that or the Lavine deal, I definitely prefer the Lavine deal, but that's not bad.
Definitely. I think so too. And again, you just get a little more offensive firepower from a spot where you don't have it, and you get some size. The next one, maybe you think the timeline doesn't work here, so I understand if you turn this one down, but it's not a big contract. I had one mocked up also to San Antonio, just Keldon Johnson, and you send Chicago's first-round pick back to them. Again, the timeline doesn't really work there, but it was more like you got some floor spacing with Wemby and Vooch.
No. If I'm San Antonio, I want that first. I want that first a hell of a lot more than I want Vooch. And I don't want any more Wemby minutes not playing at the 5. I just think Wemby is so clearly better at the 5 than the 4.
Okay, the next one I got, Memphis, Brandon Clark, John Conchar, and 2 second-round picks. And the reason I did that one was Just again, lineup versatility. Not that front court is a big need for Memphis, but now you have Edey, Triple J, and Vooch. You would have 48 minutes of Edey and Vooch. You kind of have a little bit of lineup versatility with those guys, and you just have more offensive firepower, which is what I think Memphis needs.
You know what's hilarious? I considered almost this exact deal. I had Clark, Conchar, and a future first instead of 2 seconds. And that's a pretty easy price to live with if you're Memphis. I mean, also, you're so deep. You've been so great at developing players, right? Where you're getting out of Jalen Wells now, where you're getting out of Scottie Pippen Jr. You just have so many dudes who can play. The reason that even though the price is very easy for Memphis to part with, that I don't love it is they already have Edey as like their slow-footed 5 who they can play alongside Triple J. I don't think they want another slow big in their fast-paced, defense-oriented sort of system and identity. I think that they want the Triple J and Edey minutes, and then they want the Triple J at the 5 minutes. I don't think that they want to feel like they should be playing an actual center for like 48 minutes, you know. But I considered that too, because, I mean, he would give them more offensive punch, and that's something that Memphis has needed for years. But I don't think that he's the cleanest fit when they addressed it in maybe a little bit more of a cost-effective way with Edey, who's obviously not as good, but similar sort of archetype and a better rim protector.
All right, and then the last trade. I don't really think this one makes a ton of sense either, just with like timelines and stuff. But this was the last one that I thought made maybe a little sense considering their injuries and depth at the position. I wrote down the Hornets. Grant Williams, Vasilije Micic, and Dallas's first-round pick in 27. I mean, that's the only reason is you get a first-round pick back. None of the players matter. I was just trying to come up with spots where I think a team needs, because a lot of teams don't really need another 5 on their roster, but Charlotte with their injuries and depth I thought made a little bit of sense.
I still think that Charlotte's really far away. I don't know, and maybe someday Mark Williams will be healthy again. Personally, I don't like that. I don't really like that too much for either side. I have a couple pitches, though, that I'd like to give you. Okay. One of these I considered. I ultimately decided it's not worth it, but I did consider maybe a sneaky little Vooch to the Nuggets, which would be a package of them giving up all of their other backup centers. Yeah, well, it's sort of a weird trade. Here's what I have. Ready? Zeke Naji, Saric, DeAndre Jordan, and then you throw in Jalen Pickett. And then maybe you throw in a first. I think you have to, because
I love it.
all of those players are zero value.
If you could make it happen, I would do that trade if I was Denver.
Here's the thing, because I definitely think that makes Denver better. Is it worth it to be dedicating $20 million in cap, even acknowledging that the 4 other guys who they're dedicating like $18 million to in the cap in the aggregate between Najee, Saric, Pickett, DeAndre Jordan, all those guys are completely unplayable in a playoff setting, so they're kind of wasting that money right now. But is it worth it to give up $20 million and a future first? I think you would have to give for 15 minutes a game, because that's what Vooch is going to give you.
Implications too, or no?
Does it have what?
Does it have apron implications or no?
No, it shouldn't. I mean, there would only be a difference of like $1 million in the cap. They have to basically have the salaries matching to make
I think Denver's
work.
So close. I think it would be worth it to just have a competent big to bring off the bench. And obviously that was supposed to be Holmes, but
right. So I don't disagree. And maybe if this were the alternative versus nothing, right? If it were only one or the other, actually then maybe I could get behind this. Here's my thought, though. If they are going to make a move for a backup center, wouldn't you be better off doing it for like a Larry Nance, who's $11 million and then is expiring, so then Deron Holmes can take over next year? You're not still committed to Vooch at $20 million a year.
And then you don't have to give up that first, yeah.
Which you wouldn't, I wouldn't think. I think you give up Najee, and I don't know, you can throw in Pickett and a second or 2. That just feels like a more efficient deal to me, to get 15 minutes of quality backup center play. But I don't know. I mean, this would be interesting. It would be kind of a crazy role for Vooch to take. And again, it's just like, is that worth $20 million and giving up a first? Probably not is where I landed on it if there's more efficient alternatives to explore. Here's the one that I think is a little more interesting. What if, Logan, the Phoenix Suns gave up Nurk, their 2031 first, and the 2026 second. I think that makes Phoenix even worse defensively. You have two slow-footed, bad defensive bigs, but at least Nurk is a better rim protector than Vooch. Vooch is a really bad rim protector. Nurk is okay there. But I think it's a much bigger offensive upgrade than it is defensive downgrade. What do you think?
Damn, man, you're just not gonna play defense. Do you really? Like, do you think Nurk has been? Do you think Nurk is? I don't think Nurk's been that bad this year.
Offensively versus Vooch, I think there's a huge difference.
Well, no, I think there's a big difference.
The floor spacing, the post scoring,
I just don't think
passing. I'll take Vooch.
I just don't think Nurk's played that bad this year.
I think Nurk might be shooting like 41% from the field this year. I'm not gonna lie to you. 41% from the field is what he's shooting.
I mean, he's never been a good offensive player. Like,
well, let's not disrespect 2019 Yusuf
Blazers Nurk.
Yeah, before the foot injury, I actually think that he was a good offensive player. But it's tough. I mean, he's trying to do more of the floor spacing stuff, and it turns out that he sucks at shooting threes, and it's never been something he's capable of doing. You don't like that? You think that's too compromising defensively for Phoenix? Because my thought's kind of, Nurk's not a good defensive big. Vooch is a really good offensive big.
I think it would just be kind of funny.
Yeah, it would be kind of funny. But it's like, they're already all in. They're already all in on this window. Maybe try to make yourself a little better. But it's also kind of weird for Chicago because then it's like our gem is a 2031 first. That's the only one that Phoenix can give up. Everything up until then they've traded.
Vooch is on a value deal, though, so maybe it's not
the
worst, right?
Well, that's the thing. There's zero cap. I mean, they're basically on the exact same contract. I think Nurk's making $19 million this year, and Vooch is making $20 million. And I just think Vooch is a much better basketball player than Nurk. I do. I understand that everybody hates Vooch. But he's a really skilled offensive player. And
he's
Nurk's
a really good
just
offensive
not that good.
player, yeah.
I think if I were Phoenix, I would do that. It is not addressing their big need necessarily, but with the improvements they've made on the wings athletically and defensively, and with how great KD has been, and how much better they've looked when he's on the floor this year, if I could just get a better player at center, and his flaw is basically the same as my inferior center's flaw, I think I'd do it. I think I would do that. There you have it, folks. Nikola Vucevic trades that you need to consider. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, to all those who celebrate. I hope that you have a wonderful time. I hope that you have a blast with your loved ones and hug them and kiss them on the top of their heads. Logan, what are you most excited for about Thanksgiving?
Grubbing. I'm not, well, obviously seeing my family, but stuff in my face.
No,
too.
You can be real. You want to grub. You want to just bite on a turkey leg, don't you?
I'm not, I like turkey ham. Honestly, I'm probably most excited to eat some mac and cheese and some potatoes, man. I love Thanksgiving, dude. Thanksgiving is such an elite holiday.
Now, talk to me about this mac and cheese. Do you have breadcrumbs there?
Nah, my grandma just makes like a casserole,
A mac and cheese casserole?
Well, like, I say, I meant, like in one of the casserole tins, but it's
sure.
just mac and cheese.
Yeah, right. But there's no layer of breadcrumbs on top. It's just straight mac and cheese.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just like a cheese on cheese on cheese.
Right. I've always preferred a mac with breadcrumbs. I'm not going to lie to you.
What's your favorite
I need something to break up the straight cheese. If I get a mac and cheese with breadcrumbs, that would be my number one. I enjoyed mashed potatoes. Sometimes we'll get a snazzy dessert from an aunt. I have an aunt who's a good baker. She'll bring in some you don't see coming maybe. I like pumpkin pie with a little whipped cream. Classic. My uncle does a nice smoked turkey. I don't know if he's on turkey duties this year, but if he is, I'd be excited for that. And, I really like stuffing. And, I love just a good old-fashioned bread roll if it's really done right.
These are phenomenal takes. I love a pecan pie would probably be my number one overall pick. But
are you a big pie guy overall?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? All right, settle down, buddy. Simmer. I'm not as huge a pie guy. I'm a little bit off-put by cooked fruit.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
It's not my favorite texture. And I love fruit. I don't love fruit desserts so much in general. I like a good old-fashioned chocolate dessert. But when you get pumpkin pie, you don't have the cooked fruit texture. It's just a filling. It's just a much nicer texture to me. I love the crust of a pie. Oh, I love a pie crust. But I'm not so big on the cooked fruit.
Dude, my number one food all time, this is going to sound really dumb.
All time?
All time.
Thanksgiving or just world?
Period. Dude, my high school used to have these hot collard greens they would make every day. And the school lunches sucked. Like, school lunches always sucked. But the lunch ladies would make these hot collard greens, man. And I swear, I'd be excited for lunch.
My number one food all time is a ribeye steak.
Want some hot collard greens, man.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. I would love it if we could do a ribeye at Thanksgiving. You know, everybody got steaks.
Let's change the culture, man.
Dude, my dad has been pushing this for years. He's Canadian, of course, so he really doesn't have a say in it.
He might be onto something, man. He might be onto something.
I kind of think so, because how many people do you hear, Logan? And you just said it. And actually, at this point, the take that I'm about to say, I think, has already been beaten to death and overdone. But I'm going to say it nonetheless. You say, yeah, I don't love turkey. It's the centerpiece of the meal, and it doesn't really excite anybody. It is a low-tier meat. It is a low-tier meat dish, turkey.
I mean, we always have it accompanied with some ham, either
with some ham,
you know,
sure.
some country ham or just some
One
ham
time,
regular.
my great aunt made some ham. She left it out for multiple days. Nobody touched it. You know, but that's the sort of wacky encounters you have at a family get-together. But now that I think about it, you do need some sort of central animal that the group can collectively dismember, right? That's what brings us together. And I understand there's a historic significance of the turkey, right? Isn't there? Although really all the stories are made up about Thanksgiving, I think. But you can't really just do like burgers, you know, or steaks. That's too individualistic. We need something collective. But what if we just brought in a cow and we each took a part of the cow? You know, I'll take the chuck. You'll take a sirloin. That could bring us together. You'll take the testicles, of course, and you'll eat them raw. You won't even eat them. You'll just fondle them. Anyways, just some ideas for the holiday season. Just throwing shit out there. Hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. It's a great holiday, Logan. It's your number one holiday, correct?
Oh, yeah. I love it. Well, I always just associate,
holiday.
Man, old school Steelers Ravens, man. You know, sit down, watch the Ravens somehow steal a win from the Steelers. But
criminal.
I love Thanksgiving, man.
Yeah, hopefully the football games are good. We'll be back on Friday, folks. We'll be talking about who knows what. It'll depend on how the next 48 hours of life goes. But appreciate you guys. Love you guys. And if you love us and you want more of our stuff, it's everywhere. YouTube. You got all of our full shows, NBA, NFL, and all of our video breakdowns there as well, our video essays where we go more in depth on a single topic. You can listen to all of our shows across audio platforms. You can follow us across social media, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. And you can join our Discord if you want. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. You can also check out our merch at our link tree. That is at breakingtea.com. We've got some shirts up there, and I hope that we have some hats. I'm not 100% sure if they're up by now, but if they are, then they are, and you can get them at breakingtea.com. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.